Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are joining us today, and welcome to our sixth online event for Hacking HR Seattle. I am Josue Briceno. I'm the coordinator for the team lead and for Hacking HR in the Seattle chapter, also principal for hrcitizen.com and HR director for SUSE. We have an amazing keynote speaker today who will talk about improving the impact of your leadership coaching. What an interesting presentation we have today. Can't wait for that. But before we go that far, please let me explain a little bit about Hacking HR. Hacking HR is a global learning community and information exchange platform created to discuss all things at the intersection of the future of work and technology. This is a space for learning, collaboration, and sharing. Our purpose is to create the best HR that has ever existed before by creating the best HR practices, which enable organizations to adapt and thrive, which means they are able to be effective in solving today's and future challenges like we are facing right now with this pandemic. So to achieve this purpose, we have focused on two goals, basically, creating the largest global collaborative community of HR, business and technology leaders, organizational practitioners, and informing our community of the latest trends in the future of work, technology, and HR. There are two functions within Hacking HR. The Global Hacking HR function, which serves as the primary brand and provides key resources and programs, designing and running global programs, and local Hacking HR chapters, which are agile, self-organized teams and partners and the level of this community. The Seattle chapter is an open community, which means that anyone can join us. This chapter is self-managing community acting within the global Hacking HR groups. So feel free to join us. And I am part of the leadership team for the Seattle chapter as a coordination team lead, and I'm thrilled partnered with Santana Grayson, infrastructure team lead, and Brian Buck, comms and content lead. Please, if you can put through the chat your LinkedIn information, let's make those connections right away. And with no further ado, I have the privilege to introduce you to our keynote speaker, Brian Buck. Brian is a keynote speaker and transformation coach for small to medium-sized businesses. He focuses on key sustainable business successes through the balance of results and relationships. Brian helps companies grow their business, eliminate barriers that keep them stuck, shift their thinking, and increase their profits. Brian blends productivity, quality improvement, personal development, and masterful communication skills to exponentially increase your positive contributions. If you are looking for some freedom, passion, and connection in your life and business, then Brian is your option. He would love to help you. So, with no further ado, Brian, take it away.
Hey, thank you so much, Josue. I am excited to be a part of this and uh, to have gone from behind the scenes in leading our Seattle chapter to actually presenting and serving our community. What I wanted to share today was something that I'm very passionate about, and that is the concept of leader as coach. There's many different documentation out there, studies, books on what the power it is when leaders actually coach their teams instead of being authoritarian order givers. But what I found is the training that leaders get when they're the leader as coach has actually been pretty small. The key things they might teach you is listen, ask open-ended questions, and that's about it. There's lots of things, and that's a great start. And many leaders have been successful, and I used to be successful using that basic framework. I also come from the world of Toyota production system, or lean. And we actually have things that are very specific questions to be able to help us lead our teams in ways that are more engaging. But then I started my business to become a professional coach. And in there, I learned many skills that were never taught to me as a leader, even a leader that fully embraced leader as coach. And so I wanted to bring back 5 key things that if you started to take these and what professional coaches do, it's going to take your leadership to a whole nother level and the impact that you can make. And if you aren't a leader, although I would say everyone's a leader, this will actually, like say you're in HR, consider these skills that I'm going to talk about in ways that you want to use to develop your leaders, so that way you can be able to pass them on and really make a great impact to your organization. So to begin, let's go ahead and start off with a story. I want you to imagine you are first aid certified. You know how to do CPR. You did the practice dummy. You've got your certification and you're ready to go and excited to try your new skills. You're out on the beach and you see someone fall over and they appear to be struggling. You know that it's potentially a CPR situation, and they could still breathe, they could talk, but you could tell that they're struggling. Do you just jump in and make it and help them? You can't. Before anybody who's trained in CPR, you have to get permission to help first. You can't presume that they need help. And in this situation, it's the same as coaching. Coaching, we always want to get permission first. We just can't go in with a coaching hat and begin coaching. So that's the number one, is get permission, not presumption. And it's easy to do. And that is by just asking questions. Hey, would you like some help with this? Would some advice or talking through this with me help you achieve your goal? So a simple question opens up. What happens if the reverse? Has anyone ever been coached without permission? I had this happen once, probably many times, but I had a situation that really showed up once where I had a new VP came in and gave me unsolicited advice on how to do our budget. And the unsolicited advice was something was already part of the budget. And what that did for me is it absolutely lowered my the respect or the impact that this person had. I felt like I was being coached to instead of coached with. And so it's very important when you're entering a coaching situation that you get that permission. That now brings me up to number 2. When I left an organization after being there for a long time, I had a supervisor who reported to me. And when I left, the supervisor said, Brian, I learned a lot from you. And I said, great, let me know one thing that I helped you with. And he thought for a second and he said, it used to always make me mad when I came to you for advice that you never gave advice, but you just asked me questions. And then it hit me. You were helping me discover that I actually knew the answers. And that taught me so much about trusting myself, how to find the answers with your guidance. And to me, that really fit into what I was trying to achieve. And that is number 2, and that is equal positioning. As a coach, we need to make sure that we are equal with the coachee that we are working with. And this is important when you're a leader as a coach, to leave your title at the door, leave your position at the door. Because when you're coaching, it really is about recognizing that they are the ones that have the answer. And as a coach, we are actually guiding them to their insight. I do want to also preface that there is a difference between being a coach or a consultant slash trainer. So, as I said, a coach is about helping them find the answers within themselves. A consultant or a trainer is the one who has the answers, and we are helping guide them to say, hey, go try this and see. That's a little bit different. It's not like I'm training you how to do something. So, as a leader, you have to recognize which hat you're putting on. There are absolute times as leaders we aren't coaching, and to call ourselves the leader as a coach wouldn't be the right mindset or the right framework. And there are times we could say, okay, I need to put on my consultant hat, or I need to use I'm going to be a mentor to you now, and I'm going to say, I need you to do this, or these are my expectations. That's not coaching. It's training, mentoring. But when you put on your coaching hat is when you say, hey, I'm equal and I'm supporting and serving you. Number 3, what is the one thing you can get anybody to talk about that they love to talk about? Themselves. Ourselves are our most popular thing to talk about and think about. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean people are arrogant, but it is the reality that we are with 24 hours a day. And so number 3 is recognize that coaching is about serving them and what they want, their goals. So I want to preface this with thinking about what's the difference between coaching for performance versus coaching for development. Coaching for performance is something we often have to do as leaders where there is a lack or a problem, and we want to be able to consult or teach how to get out of that problem so that way it doesn't happen again. Coaching for development is a completely different framework. Coaching for development is about building on strengths or towards what they want instead of fixing problems. I have a friend named Renata Porter who once said, if we actually shifted our energy to doing more coaching for development, we would actually have less coaching for performance because we are actually proactively helping people be their best, their most engaged, serving our customers and our teams at the highest levels. So we get so often into thinking coaching for performance is we're coaching, but as we talked about earlier, we're actually consulting or teaching. So when we do coaching for development, it's important that it's about their goals and dreams. I just read a great book called The Culture Code, and they had a wonderful story about a call center that had like crazy high turnover rates. And they wanted to figure out how do they turn that around. So they did 3 different control groups. The first group, they just trained like they always did. The second one, they trained like they always did, but then they gave an hour where they spent more time talking about what is the company's goals, their visions, what do their customers really want. Everybody got a t-shirt with the logo of the company, and so they could be able to see, I am part of this big group. The last group got the same training, but their hour was spent on talking about what's important to them. What are their dreams? What are their desires? They got a branded shirt, but with their name on it. What they found in that study is that last group had vastly lower turnover, better productivity, and better connection to the company. Why is that? The reason is even though we all want to be a part of something big, We are all autonomous and we care about what we care about as individuals. And so as a coach, as a leader, as a coach, there's going to be times you might actually want to talk about their dreams and desires that might even be outside of work. There's a framework of 3 things that are really good questions to get them to be thinking about and coach them towards. And that is, what do they want to experience? Where do they want to grow? Where do they want to, how do they want their contribution to be? And that may be even outside of your organization. But where this works for a leader is you can be able to help them make connections on how what they're doing now can tie into those. They might, maybe that's going to help you realize, if they wanted to lead a team to eliminate poverty in their town, maybe you would then see an opportunity as a leader for them to get that coordination skills and to be able to tie to what they're actually wanting to do. So they're effectively meeting their goals and also helping your organization. It also makes them feel more connected to you because you care about what they care about. You know, the modern workplace, no one is going to work in the same place for 30 years like my parents' generation. So if we could be able to make the investments in people now through leaders as coaching and helping them, even if it doesn't necessarily meet your bottom line or your business need, it still is going to have a positive effect, because just like that call center team, they are going to feel more connected with what your organization is doing because it's a tool, that's a stepping stone towards what they want. A question I like to ask in this realm of coaching is about serving them is coming with no agenda. And you just ask, what is on your mind right now? And let that come out. I often would even ask, what is on your heart right now? If you feel comfortable being vulnerable, because where people are at in their heart or mind really will help you better ground them. Like, I don't know if you ever had this experience, but have you ever been distracted because something's going on in your life or outside? Asking this question helps people explore and understand and make sense, or ask for permission to say, you know what, I can't think of anything else. So a leader is a coach by caring about them and what's on their mind and their heart and where they want to go is going to greatly take your ability to serve them and better serve your customers and business. So I have an exercise now for everybody. You could get out your pencil and paper or add to your notes. I want you to write down a piece of advice that you received that you know would help you, but you're not doing it yet. Most people always have a list of, I know I should, but you're not. Can you write that down? The reason why that is an important question, because it's going to help you better have empathy for the people you coach. And this is point number 4. It's 80% psychology and 20% strategy. Most people know what to do, but it's their psychology that's actually getting in the way of them actually doing it. So I always like to tell the story of I could find a smoker and I can give them a pamphlet that says, here's the 10 things you need to do to quit smoking. That doesn't mean they're going to quit smoking, because they've got all sorts of other things going on. And you as a coach, you are wanting to help them explore that. If you remember what we talked about earlier, you are helping them get insights about what they already know. It's inside of them. You're drawing that out. And so what you want to do is create a safe place to name the fear they have. There's a lot of fears people can have, more so than I ever really anticipated before I went down my professional coaching journey. There is fear of not being enough, fear of it's not available to me. There's even fear of success. There's people who know they want to be successful, but they fear how much more work or the ability to sustain once they get into a new zone. The interesting thing about fear is it will stop you in your tracks until you name it. Once you name the fear, once you understand it and embrace the fear, then you could figure out what you can do to dissipate the fear. I was with a client once and I created this quote just from talking, but it was, you can never outthink fear, only action will dissipate it. But you have to know what that fear is. So, and it's also important to know when you're coaching, we're talking about coaching for development. When you grow, it's uncomfortable. People feel safe in the familiar. And so by helping them understand where's the uncomfort, maybe they don't call it fear, but they could definitely tell you what's uncomfortable. And once they can name that, then they can be able to address it. You also want to help them when they help them discover when they see things in absolutes. This is another thing our brain will often do. This always happened. This will never happen. This is always, and it's a good way as a coach to be able to help them be able to point out, what evidence do you have that it's always? What evidence do you have that maybe it doesn't always happen? Because our brains often make things bigger than they are despite the evidence. And you can't just tell someone that. They have to discover it for themselves. One of my favorite books by Chip and Dan Heath is called Switch. Actually, I'm basing on the name. I think it's Switch. But when they put in there and they say, people support what they create. And so coaching and getting this 80% psychology, 20% strategy mindset is helping them create the ability to diffuse when they're generalizing. Because all of a sudden now they are the ones who are seeing it as not always, not never, but only in small situations. Reframing is another thing to be able to help a coach, help you as a leadership coach. This is part of the psychology because once again, how we see things dictates how we react to things. So there's a tennis player, I heard the story recently. There's a tennis tournament coming up. One tennis player is 27-0, 27 wins, 0 losses. The other one has 14 wins, 13 losses. And you're going to make a bet on who's going to win. Who do you bet on? Most people would say, well, the person is 27-0. But if I tell you, well, this person is 27-0 is an adult playing grade school kids. The person who's 14-13 plays ex-Olympic tennis players. Now, who do you believe is going to win? So competition, greater competition actually means better performance. And so sometimes even our definition of success needs to be questioned. So by reframing, it completely changed your idea behind that. So when people are trying to achieve their goals, help them reframe the things that are standing in their way. Just like the absolutes, the always or the nevers, but maybe they need to be able to see a mountain not as something that stops them, but something that's a catalyst. As a coach, I might say, who says you need to go over the mountain? Maybe you go around the mountain because you still get to the same place. So helping reframe will greatly help people with the psychology part. Another thing that's part of the psychology is just help them gain insight to their competing priorities. There's a story of, I don't know if he was a doctor or someone studying, but there was heart patients, and they all discovered they're going to need to take pills every day for the rest of their life, or else they will have a heart attack and die, most likely. And this researcher went up to them the day of that diagnosis and said, how likely do you think it is that you will take these pills and get the refills on time? And they're like, are you crazy? Of course I would. Why would you even ask? If I don't take these pills, I'm going to die. They interviewed these patients a year in, and they only found like 57% actually took their pills every day and got the refills. And this researcher went up to one and asked, hey, can you tell me why you didn't take them every day? And he says, I need to take them every day. I'm going to die if I don't. He said, I didn't ask that. I said, why didn't I? I know you know why you should, but tell me why you didn't. And he started to say, well, I'm not going to be like my dad who has to take pills every day of his life. I'm not some old man that has to live on pills the rest of my life. Now, all of a sudden, you've got two competing priorities. One, I need to take these to live. Two, I don't want to identify myself as an old person that needs to do this. I don't want to appear weak for having to do this. So these are two competing priorities, and one wins every time. And so as a coach, these are the opportunities to work with them to help them figure out how do they maybe get a win-win? How do they reframe? How do they make sure that they don't have something that's working in opposite of what they actually want? Just like when I asked you earlier to write down advice you know that would help you that you're not doing yet, you probably have one of these things in place. Competing priorities, maybe you've got some absolutes, maybe you fear success, or maybe there's a fear there, or just the growth zone is uncomfortable. And this is another way of using psychology to be able to help people overcome their barriers. And that is help them gain insight from imaginary roles. As I shared earlier, the goal of coaching is for them to find their own insights. So by using imaginary roles would be, hey, if you were in the future, your future self, you've achieved all of this, you've achieved your goals, what advice would you have for you today? Or you might say, if I went back and I talked to 5-year-old you, who saw where you're at, and they had the simplest mindset. You know how kids can be able to see things in just a beautifully naive way that actually cuts past all the BS we put in our heads? What would your 5-year-old version of you give advice to? Or you might ask, what if your best friend was watching our coaching conversation? What would your best friend say? Other people like Tony Robbins might use archetypes. So they've got like the magician or the royalty. If you were the king and everything went your way, how would they act? All of those things, these different characters that you are inviting them to give advice to, it all comes from one person. It's still coming from within them. But because you are having it come from other fake people or imaginary people in their life, it helps them see things in different ways. So that way they really get to the heart of what they can do. I want to move to the last tip here. But I want to start with a story. And the story is 1996. I was always kind of a computer geek. I've always loved technology. And I remember telling my friends and my mom, you know what would be really cool is if we can actually get all of our books just on like a little like screen and we could carry it around with us. So that way we don't have to have these stacks and stacks of books. I'm a huge voracious reader. So I've always loved books, which means I always have piles of books that I'm bringing around everywhere. And I remember people saying, "Well, that's stupid. No one's going to want that. I love the feel of a book. Who would want to read that in a bath? You know, people like to read books in the bathtub. No one would want to bring that into the bathtub." A few years later, the dang Kindle was created. And I was like, I invented the Kindle, but I didn't do anything about it. And And it still bugs me to this day to think about how many innovative thoughts have we had that we didn't take action on, but we start to see months or years later. I heard a story once of someone who wrote a song just kind of on the side, didn't do anything about it. A few months later, they're in a car and their girlfriend said, "Oh my gosh, that's your song." And he's like, "I know." And this is number 5. When you coach, always end with reflection and an action plan. Question I always like to ask at the end of this is, what's been most useful to you during this session? Because when you do a coaching session, you do discover a lot of things. You're reframing, you're understanding the psychology, you're understanding goals and what they want. As a quick aside, most people don't even have a clear picture of what they want. Most people are unhappy because they've never actually defined what they actually want. They just know what they don't want. So when you ask what was most useful to you, they're going to point to one of those, because that insight or clarity about what they want or how they can address or what they can do to be able to achieve what they want is huge. And it's important for them to recognize it. I spent many years doing training and always have, here's the learning objectives. This is what I want you to get out of it. But when you coach, they are the ones to be able to say what they got out of it. And it might not always be what your intention is, but that's okay, because you aren't a trainer, you're a coach. It's about what comes out for them. You also want them to get commitment to take action. A friend of mine once posted, and I love this, is baby steps are still steps, because progress is exponential. All we have to do is do little things towards where we want every day. And pretty soon people are going to be like, how did you get here so fast? They didn't see all of the little things along the way. So in wrapping up, these are 5 key things for you as a leader to improve how you are being as a leader, as a coach. 1, get permission, don't presume. 2, be in equal positioning. Be a peer, throw your title out. 3, coaching is about serving them and what they want. 4, 80% psychology, 20% strategy. And number 5, end with reflection and an action plan. So I'm going to take my own advice. In the chat, please write what was most useful to you in this Hacking HR Seattle session. Put that in the chat. Also, write down an insight you have, that you not necessarily an insight, but what action might you take based off of today's conversation. Okay. Well, once again, my name is Brian Buck. I'm a business transformational coach. I have loved serving you today and hopefully giving you some key things that are going to make you have a better impact as a leader. Feel free to reach out to me at brianbuck.org, and I'm also available on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. This was such a fantastic conversation today. And what really caught my attention was the equal position, step number 2. That caught my attention. And it's always difficult to leave those titles outside of the room. And I can see that people struggle doing that. So, what would be your best advice to help them, leave those titles out of the room?
Yeah, I think the best advice I have for that is recognize it's temporary. It's just for that hour. As I said, is you're not always in leader as a coach mode. You're not always talking about what do they want and where are they going. So I think it's easy to say I'm putting on this hat during this time, because I know working with a lot of leaders, it's a challenge sometimes to empower, because oftentimes a lot of leaders feel like they might be depowered when they do that. The truth is, you actually get more power by empowering more. But until you've experienced that a few times, do you actually begin to trust that truth? That's an insight I can say that you won't believe until you've experienced it. So for that leader, I would say, just with your team, make it, do a 1 hour a month with each of your team and be in coach mode.
Fantastic.
And then you'll find that you could be able to do this more and more. But yeah, you could just say, I'm putting on the coach hat, which means I'm taking off the expert hat, the consultant hat, or the trainer hat.
That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that piece of advice, Brian. And I have another observation. Get commitment about an action plan. So after all these sessions and reflections, I think that the most important is that they translate that into an action plan and they commit to that plan. So any best practices in how they can achieve that?
Um, it varies, but I think the main thing is they just need to have it written somewhere, whether it be on a post-it that goes on the computer, or you have them send you an email afterwards, or they share with their team, because it's very easy to think of an action when you're having a coaching conversation, but then forget what the heck you agreed to. So that is actually something maybe a leader can do, is when you get that commitment, maybe the coach says, hey, here's a little summary. Hey, I really love what we discussed today. Here's the insight you told me, and here's the action you committed to. Because then you get that in writing. And the commitment piece, one of the things I coach businesses on, we all want accountability, but we all don't get commitment first. And if you are going after accountability without commitment, you're the jerk. Because if they haven't promised to it, now you are forcing accountability, but they never agreed to it. So part of that coaching is, this is the action you committed to achieve your goals, and how can I support you and keep you accountable with what you've committed to. And so it's just really a matter of helping people remember what it is they said in that moment. And you might even do like a follow-up, a week later. Hey, what's the action that you're doing? What challenges? Has anything else come up? We talk about how much fear plays a part. I'm part of a coaching program, and someone was going to reach out and kind of do some business development, and they found they froze. They started to overthink themselves. So even though they knew what they were going to do, when it came time to do the action, they also froze. And so by positioning yourself as that coach, you could be that phone a friend, and oh my goodness, I know I said I was going to do this, but this came up. You say, well, let's explore that. What are the insights? What are the things that is holding you back? Is it the discomfort, or what are you fearing, or what? What would the person who got this done? How would they act and believe? And could you try that? That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when people is at their comfort zone, that's where everything starts, right? So that's what we need, a piece of advice, a coach. And that's exactly what I really value about this conversation, Brian. Thanks for sharing all these best practices. And to our greater audience, thank you very much for joining us today. And stay tuned for next upcoming events. So thank you very much and be safe.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye bye.